There are 294,000 religious congregations in the United States. Protestant, Catholic, and Jewish traditions share a commitment to social justice. They shelter the homeless, feed the hungry, and provide counseling, health care, and daycare to those in need. Working together with elected officials at local, state, and national levels, faith-based individuals are making an impact.
The annual Impact Legislative Briefing in Washington, D.C. provides a special opportunity to experience the power of working as part of an interfaith community. Every year, for 4 days, nearly 600 Impact members gather in the buildings which house our Congress in Washington, D.C. to examine the issues which Congress is considering, with the help of experts, including senators and congresspeople.
I'm Diane Modrell, and I'm from the Kansas City area, Heartland Presbytery, and am current chair of the Missouri Impact Group.
My name is Laura Hartsock. I'm from Mebane, North Carolina. I'm a United Methodist woman for the North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Women. I'm a National Impact representative.
I've been at every one of the Impact briefings, and I think the fact that I keep coming back is a testimony to the fact that it is empowering. It can be lonely if you're really active in social witness, and to come together and be supported and nurtured and empowered by others is really helpful, meaningful.
This is my first briefing, and I will never ever miss any more.
And it was through the state California Impact that I've become aware of the National Impact, and this is my first opportunity to attend the National Impact briefing here in Washington, D.C. It's been a life-changing experience, as I've heard from our representatives, our senators, and others who have spoken so beautifully and articulately to the issues that we're dealing with: justice, peace, and our environment.
And thank all of you from Impact for the invitation to come and to talk with you. Really, I'm here for a couple of reasons, but first and foremost is to thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I think on behalf of all of the members of our select committee, and certainly the staff of the select committee, because so many of you have been so terribly helpful to us during the life of the committee. Various organizations have helped us when we've gone around the country to secure witnesses for the committee, to secure testimony, site visits, so that we could better understand the plight of America's children and the families in which they live, and that we could better convey that to our colleagues here in the Congress in trying to get them to make some of the right decisions with respect to the policy affecting our children, and to remove themselves from some of the political debate and try to focus on what it is that we know works with our children and what it is that we know that doesn't work, and to try to pick the former. We don't always do that because sometimes that's not necessarily politically popular at the moment, or it costs money, or it does something. You know, we opened the 80s with a joke that turned out to be all too true, and that was that certainly Ronald Reagan must love the poor because he created so many of them. And we now as a country are inheriting that caseload from Ronald Reagan. And we must now struggle to see what it is we are going to do with these children and with these families. But more importantly, how we're going to change our policies so that we don't continue to create the incredible numbers of poor children in this country, that sometime we will be able to stand before you in the near future and tell you that the children are not the poorest group in this country as they are today, and to tell you that children in fact have access to quality education and to child care, and that their parents have maternal leave so they can stay home with them when they're critically ill or a member of their family are ill. But we just cannot continue to have the numbers of poor people in this country that we have. Ruth mentioned that the committee has released a report today which compares us with other developed and developing nations in the world. And of course, what we find out is that no other nation, certainly no other westernized developed nation, tolerates the number of poor people within their countries that we do. No other developed nation tolerates the fact that of their poor population, 40% of them are poor. And certainly no other nation tolerates the number of poor children at very young ages that we do as a nation, or certainly that we tolerate among our minority populations. We cannot continue to accept these figures. We cannot continue to accept the growth in the impoverished in this nation if politicians are to believe about their vision of the United States. We like to think now that maybe after 45 years of the Cold War, of the arms race, discussions of peace dividends, that America is once again going to be able to compete. Going to be able to compete in the world of economics, the world of trade. And yet we find that America has attached to its leg a monster of an anchor. And that is that we are losing 20% of our children to drugs and to murder and to violence and to school dropouts. None of our other competitors are going to accept that kind of waste of a human resource, that rate of defective resources that will go into that economic model for the 90s and for the next century. We must understand as policymakers, and your role is to make us understand, as you have so well, that the children that are born with deficits will continue to contribute to the national deficit every day of their life, and that we have got to stem that tide. One of the things our international report shows is that we clearly have the ability to do it. It's not a question of talent. It's not a question of knowledge or technology. It's a question of will. The president likes to say that this nation has more will than wallet. I challenge him to that. It's just the opposite. What we don't have is we don't have a desire to end poverty. We just simply don't have it as a nation. And yet there's so many positive things that can flow from diminishing the numbers of the impoverished among us. We know very clearly that it is the greatest predictor of sort of all of the bad things that can happen to you in a society. We know when we look at poor families that live on the margin, families of four that earn $12,000 so they can be classified as poor. We know that the struggle that those families go through on a day-to-day basis is far greater than the struggle of any congressional family, making 10 times the amount of money. We know that a dead battery can cause the loss of a job. We know that a car breaking down can cause the failure to get to the hospital. We know that lack of good child care means that you lose your job. The people who are poor, that just demonstrate the same maternal instincts that we all want to demonstrate on behalf of our children and our families' children. When they demonstrate those same instincts and stay home with a sick child, they've got an economic catastrophe in the family. They have lost a job. We have witnessed in this committee of mothers telling us about leaving their children with strangers, next-door neighbors who they didn't know because they were so frightened of losing their job. We've listened to the legions of women who've used up their sick leave, their vacation pay, not because they were sick or they were taking a vacation, because their children were. Where today in this country, unlike any other Western nation, we have no policy of maternal leave. We have no policy of parental leave. We have no policy of pregnancy leave. We just don't understand the kinds of supports that families need. Why? Because as families were changing in this country, the rhetoric of the right said it was out of luxury, that it was women who chose not to meet their obligations. It was women who chose not to raise their children. It was women who chose not to stay with their children. The fact is simply the opposite. They went to work because they had obligations. They went to work because they were trying to raise their children and meet their obligations to their family. And what have we seen? We've seen that those families are under more stress, have more trouble than any other families in the country. We see, and again in the international report, the number of children that are affected by divorce, more so than any other country that we can be compared with. And yet, we as a national body, the Congress of the United States, fails to understand the change in the family landscape and seek to provide policies that will support those families. This isn't about intervention. This is about a rational employer telling you that if you have a critically ill parent or child, that they understand and that can be accommodated. Employers in the rest of the world do it. Why can't we here? It's factored in the cost of products that we compete with. Products from Japan, products from Germany, products from Europe. It's cost of doing business. It isn't here and we still can't compete. Maybe we would think that if we had healthy families, if we relieved some of the stress, we would have better workers, more efficient workers, greater productivity. But when you're consumed at the workplace with the well-being of your children or of your spouse or of your parent because of inadequate health care, because of inadequate leave, because of inadequate pay, you're not going to do a very good job. It's just inconsistent. It's inconsistent with human nature. It's inconsistent with what we know about one another, what we know about ourselves. I sit and talk to members of Congress, and when their sons and daughters are having trouble, they have trouble. They can't focus. They want to go home early. They want to get on a plane. They want to be near their family. Can't they understand that poor parents have those same urges and those same desires? And can't we understand that we can fashion a policy, and we can begin with an incomes policy, we can begin with a family support policy, so that you're not punished by virtue of the economic status of your parents? And can't we understand that if we do it right, it's so much less expensive than coming back and trying to rehabilitate them, to compensate for what we failed to do at the outset. You've listened to me before and you've listened to others. Unfortunately, I think it's now becoming doctrine. That there's a whole host of programs out there that the former president attacked and this president fails to fund, all of which yield to us far more in economic benefits than the cost of running those programs and delivering those services. And it starts with prenatal care and it ends with a decent education and support for families. All of them just on the basis of cost benefit are positive programs. But all of them spin off much healthier children, much more loving parents, the easier of bonding with the new child because the child is healthy. And policymakers have got to understand that there really is no benefit to a nation to have poor people. None whatsoever. And the meager transfer of resources that are necessary to lift people above the poverty line, to make sure that work in fact pays for them as it does for me, so that people don't end up who go to work every day of the year and end up poor, that the meager transfer of resources is fully within our ability, not just out of the peace dividend, but the resources will flow from economic justice, from tax fairness, and tax equity. That's all that is required for this nation to have the resources necessary to address families in need and families at risk. Nothing more than that. But you cannot for a moment address the needs of these children and their families, and in fact all of our children and all of our families, if you're going to have a tax system and an economic system that's based upon greed. You cannot go through another decade where we are going to continue to transfer a disproportionate share of our assets, of our economic resources, and the wealth of this country to an increasingly few number of people. We will never. We have just done that for 10 years, by all measure. I was reading today a story in the paper and it was saying there's no problem with our tax system. The rich are paying more taxes than ever before. They are. They're making more money than ever before. They have more assets than ever before. Never have we had this kind of disparity in the country. And what do we get for it? We get no progress on infant mortality. 40,000 babies a year die. And according to this administration spokesperson, 10,000 could be saved immediately. No new technology, nothing. Just the will and the desire to go to those pregnancies early on, to raise that birth weight, to counsel the mother for a few $100s a pregnancy. We won't do that, but we'll hook those kids up until they look like astronauts to save them afterwards. For no good reason, because it was all preventable. It was all preventable. Can we really afford another decade where we're going to take us through the loss of 20% of our children? 20% of the brain power of this nation not going to be able to function to its full opportunity? Think what it means. Think what it means by luck of the draw, by the spin of the lottery, you're not going to get to fully participate. Through no say of your own, through no fault of your own, you were simply born poor. Now you can be born poor and at low birth weight, and you will probably never fully get to participate in American society. How do we do that? How do we do that to individuals? We can't. We can't. We're rich enough and we're strong enough. It's not it's not just a question of the peace dividend. Because of all of your work, we're going to have a peace dividend. Much to the surprise of President Bush, who just a few weeks ago said there wasn't any, and then he just decided to spend some of it in Nicaragua and Panama, so there must be some somewhere. The peace dividend will not be the $10 billion or the $14 billion that we cut from the defense budget this year. It will not be the $160 billion that we cut over the next 5 years. It will be the investment and the return on the investment of that dividend in our children and our families. Only then will we have a dividend, because right now our public corporation and the wealth of our nation is so poor by virtue of the impoverished people in this nation that it would be immoral for us to talk about a peace dividend. The dividend will come on the return on that investment. And it will come as sure as day follows night. There's no doubt about it. Everybody has measured it. We've looked at it 19 ways. We've looked at it from the Reagan administration's point of view, from the Harvard School of Public Health's point of view. And they both concur. There is a dividend. There is a yield. There is a positive cost benefit. All that we require is the courage and the guts to be venture capitalists on behalf of our families and our children. We all admire the people who started Apple Computer and IBM, the people who started genetic engineering firms. We all admire their venture, their courage, their ability to assemble capital. All we need is that same kind of courage on behalf of human capital in this nation. If we do that, you and I are going to have to look for something else to do. I hope that day will come. Thank you very much.
Sometimes I feel my dreams don't matter, that I am just too small. The game is theirs, the rules are set, and I don't want to play at all. But then I think of one strong voice who dreamed nighttime into day, who broke the rules and changed the game to one we all can play. We can
get up off your butt and do what you got to do. And in as much as I pay the salary, and we, the people, do, I have no problems dealing with it at all.
We'll carry it on. We'll carry it on. We'll carry it on.
The annual Impact Legislative Briefing in Washington, D.C. provides a special opportunity to experience the power of working as part of an interfaith community. Every year, for 4 days, nearly 600 Impact members gather in the buildings which house our Congress in Washington, D.C. to examine the issues which Congress is considering with the help of experts, including senators and congresspeople.
I'm Diane Modrell, and I'm from the Kansas City area, Heartland Presbytery, and am current chair of the Missouri Impact Group. Acting out our faith